I'm WG and this is a CZN character showcase. 15 days is all that's left until this game releases. We're getting very close to that sweet 2-week mark. Today's target is Lucas and my goal for today is making you familiar with the bullets mechanic in Chaos Zero Nightmare. So without further ado, Lucas is a Forster of the Hunter class, making him a bit more of a ranged unit with a mixed bag of capabilities from debuffing to buffing, as well as also damage and survivability options. I guess he's a bit of a, he can do almost anything depending on how you play him. And then he is of the passion attribute, meaning that he deals increased damage both to the tenacity bar below enemies as well as their health if they're weak to passion. So here we go. First off, the reason why it says 110% for the 3 standard cards is because that is a potential upgrade I did during the limited playtest, which means you invest free resources you can farm into a character to increase the multipliers on their cards. This goes for normal cards, or I guess you could say basic cards, which is the first 3, then unique cards, which are the last 5, and then after that also standard cards, which are cards that every character can use that you can buy at shops or otherwise get from the roguelike game mode. And these values can always go up to 20%, and this is at half that at 10%. So we have the machine gun dealing 110% damage, then the shielding incendiary bomb 110% shield, or naturally 100%. First special card is the extended magazine. It is a upgrade card, meaning the moment you play it, you won't have to play it again. It will be permanently active, giving you somewhat of a passive for the fight. The lead tag, meaning that if you pull this card, there's a 50% chance that this card reduces its cost by 1, allowing you to play this card for free. And what it does is that at the start of the turn, it creates a launcher bullet. Now, what are launcher bullets? Launcher bullets are those. Let's go through the text because there are quite a lot. First off, exhaust, meaning the moment you play this card, it goes into the banished pile, so it won't go back into your deck after you finished drawing all your cards. So it's pretty much out of the game. Ethereal, meaning if you don't play it, it also goes out of the game. And bullet being the typing of the card. The bullet is kind of, you could say, an archetype, a marker with which certain card effects interact. So this one does 100% damage and then 50% to another target, but if the target of this attack has a shield, then you deal 30% extra damage, so this one is good against shields. This one does 100% damage and then 50% to another enemy, same as the first bullet, but it applies weaken to all enemies for 1 turn. Weaken reduces the damage output for an enemy for a round by 25%. Dispersing shot deals 100% damage and 50 to others and applies frail to all enemies. Frail reduces the amount of shielding, I believe, enemies can give themselves. Cold shot deals 100% damage, 50 to another enemy, and increases all enemies action count by 1. The action count is a concept of enemies usually move after you finish your turn, but during your turn, you can play cards, and every time you play a card, it counts as an action. Enemies have an action counter above their head, and pretty much once that action counter ticks out, even though it's in your turn, they can move early. So that is a mechanic to keep in mind, and this one makes them take or gives you 1 extra action for every enemy before it triggers the effect of whatever the enemy wants to do their turn. And then flame shot, 100% damage, 50 to another enemy, and applying agony to all enemies for 1 turn. Agony is a 50% damage over time effect at the end of the turn that does true damage, meaning it always does the same amount of damage no matter how high or how low the enemy's resistances are. And that one should already be somewhat familiar from Tresser, who we showcased earlier. So now that we have those out of the way, let's look at the rest of the cards. For 1 turn, or you deal 100% damage, and then for this turn, bullet cards increase their damage by 40%. So for example, this would be 140% damage, 90% to another target, and so on and so forth. Flamethrower, you deal 200% damage to all enemies, you draw a card and then it asks you to pick any card off your hand to put away in exchange for the card you've drawn. It could be a symptom card, so a card that actually harms you, it could be a card that you're sad to part with, but overall it allows you to draw and then also get rid of another card. Flashbang, the legendary card, deals 120% damage to all enemies, applies Weaken 2, meaning the next 2 hits these enemies deal are 25% less strong, and then if the target has a shield you do 50% extra damage, so should be 170% instead of 120. And then lastly, another upgrade card, and that is when you exhaust bullet cards, meaning if you play any bullet card, you also deal 50 times 1, so 50% as a extra attack damage to all enemies. The extra attack tag is quite important because it is a keyword the same as bullets is, and there are certain interactables from different characters and the like that work together with extra attacks. So yeah, extra attack is a name you should keep in mind. So pretty much the way that works is then, for example, we shoot the armor piercing bullet, we deal 100% damage to an enemy, we deal 50% to another, and then also we deal 50% damage to all enemies. That brings us already to the ultimate. The ultimate allows you to draw 2 and also deal 250% damage to all enemies. This can actually be quite efficient in a multitude of ways, like for example, especially when your deck starts to get lower and lower and you know you're only going to have high quality cards to pull, or when it comes to farming or getting rid of ads that have like a buffing effect for a boss, having a AoE ult on hand can be quite useful. So for the first epiphany we have the change from lead to outbreak of war, meaning that every time you start a battle this will be in your hand already, as well as reducing the cost to 0, so every fight you start you can pretty much have a extended magazine active. Then the other upgrade keeps the cost, keeps everything the same, but it creates 2 launcher bullets for you, and this is also where already the first, I guess you could say, synergy comes in, and that is, look at the cost. Look at the cost of these bullet cards. Yes, it might sound great being able to play all these bullets, but you only have a very limited amount of action points every round naturally. So Luke, especially with that second upgrade, is someone, or Lucas, my fault, is someone that really struggles with getting those bullets out, and that is where Mika comes in. Mika, the blue-haired free starter character, is someone that allows you to naturally gain more AP and as well as also keep it from later turns or from turns from before into your next turn, allowing you to build up to big burst turns where you could, for example, play 5 bullets. So that is something that should be kept in mind and is actually quite relevant to him as a whole. Middle upgrade, at the start of the turn you create 1 launcher bullet, and then you also get a 30% chance to reduce its cost by 1, meaning that in pretty much every 3rd bullet you're going to be able to play it for free. The extended magazine number 4 is you create 1 bullet and then you also have a 30% chance to as well draw a card of that turn, allowing you to pretty much draw more cards every turn, or I guess draw 1 more card every 3rd turn. And then the extended magazine changes it from a upgrade to a skill, so a one-time use, as well as the exhaust tag, meaning this will only work exactly once during a battle, and that is you get 5 launcher bullets instead of just 1 or 2. Overall, the most enticing ones here are either the guarantee to always have a bullet active from the very first round, the chance to reduce the cost of the bullet by 1, making them easier to be used should you not run a Mika in your team, or the ability to get 2 bullets, whereas the draw 1 and the create 5 need to be built around more carefully to be fully used. Then we have the SSS. I'm not quite sure what it stands for. If anybody knows, let me know. But overall, you deal 100% damage, blah, blah, blah. The only thing we do is we reduce the cost. For the next one, it increases the effect of this for 2 turns instead of 1 turn. The third one increases damage by 60% per bullet card in hand. So that means this SSS is going to look at your hand. If you have 5 bullets on hand, this card is going to deal 450% damage because it's 5 times 60% additional, so 450% damage for this card, which honestly isn't too bad. Then for the fourth upgrade, you deal 150 and then increase the damage of the next bullet card. So only for one card a 120% increase, but if you only have one card anyway, this is more enticing than a 40% increase for the whole turn. And then lastly, for one turn, when using bullet cards, you deal fixed damage of 50% to a random enemy. Fixed damage should again mean something along the lines of true damage, as in no matter how high the enemy's defense, it's always going to be this amount of damage. So the most enticing options here are either going to be the 2-turn bullet damage if you have a lot of bullets, the fourth option for 120% bullet damage if you play just a few bullets, and then lastly the for one turn fixed damage, because this is something you can really build a strategy around if you just bring in somebody else that also creates bullets. Like for example, I believe they are brothers, they both have a red and a blue eye, and that is the 5-star Luke. Luke and Lucas can work together, and we'll obviously get to them before launch and talk a bit more about that potential synergy. So here we have the flamethrower. This is just a upgrade to 300% damage, as well as discarding 2 cards instead of 1, as well as you can decide to discard 2, but you could also not discard any. And if you do decide to discard 2, you also create 2 bullets. Those are again exactly the same 5 we talked about in the beginning. And then here we have just a cost reduction from 2 down to 1. We have the if critical hit, deal 50% damage to all enemies. So just an extra damage if you have a lot of crit chance build. Especially early on, this is going to be very hard to have. Then fourth one, you can exhaust up to 2 bullet cards in hand. So if you have 2 bullets, you can then select 2 bullets and then you deal 200% damage to all enemies. But if you've selected, or I guess, yeah, selected 2 bullets, you're going to do an additional 50% times 2. So a 300% AoE damage. Or then with the very last option, you deal damage to all enemies for 300% and you create launcher bullets equal to number of targets hit. By far the most interesting here are going to be the one on the very far right, being the flamethrower, the 5th option, allowing you to, for example, if you face 6 enemies, create 6 launcher bullets. The flamethrower to also allow you to create up to 2 bullets, and then potentially the cost reduction if you think it's a bit too heavy, or even the 4th option for some extra damage. Though then again, keep in mind with this costing 2 and then you also creating bullets, and bullets only being there for a turn, you do really need to really bring that Mika for that extra action points, otherwise you're never going to be able to play all that he produces. Then we have the last Epiphany upgrade, and that is Flashbang. So this one is a simple reduction from 1 to 0 cost. Here we change the effect that for one turn when hitting a target with the shield increases damage by 50%. So overall your whole team now all of a sudden does 50% more damage against shields. Here we have the retain effect, meaning this card is going to stay in your hand so long as you don't play it. So if you end your turn, it's going to stay there. You're going to draw new cards, you don't play it, it stays there. Retain effect. And then you deal 180% damage to all enemies, and then you deal 2 instances of Passion Weakness. Passion Weakness itself being a debuff that you can apply to the enemy, and what that does is it allows every single red rimmed card, so stemming from a Passion combatant, to treat the target as if it has Passion Weakness, meaning that you're going to be dealing additional damage to the target's health as well as to the target's break bar, or tenacity bar as it is referred to in this game. And what that means is if you break an enemy's tenacity bar, which with more damage to it goes faster, you gain extra ult gauge as well as also a extra AP or action point you can then use to cast more cards. This one will last for 2 turns due to the 3rd card, and then with the 4th card we get the addition of another debuff, and that is the Mark debuff. The Mark debuff, this one here is an enhanced version, usually it's just 100%, but what this is going to be doing is it applies a debuff to the target that whenever you use any attack card, the character that applied the mark, so in this case Lucas, is going to be doing a 100% damage extra attack against that target. And this one is going to be 2 stacks of marks, so for the next 2 attack cards. Furthermore, if the target has a shield, he'll again deal 50% additional damage. And then the Flashbang upgrade, which is another upgrade card, when hitting a target with shields increases damage by 30%, so just straight up permanent passive for the whole duration of the fight, just more damage against shields, which might come in very handy if we find a boss that has a significant amount of shields that you really need to deal with unless you want to get yourself wiped. So that isn't even all of it, because as usual we still have the potential, which for Lucas is something very special in that it adds the bullet tag to his basic attack, meaning that, for example, if we go back to his standard cards, the RPG 7 upgrade actually works when you trigger his basic attack, because it's now going to inherit the bullet tag, which then also synergizes well with other characters that interact with that. So that's the only addition, the addition of the bullet tag to both basic attack machine guns. Here we have the A1, or the second copy total. What this does is, I believe it should be an increase from a 40 to a 50% increase. So I apparently already pulled an extra copy during the playtest. Here we have the A2. Lucas' bullet card damage is increased by 20%, so an additional 20% multiplier on every single one of his bullet cards, which, due to the potential card, does also go for his basic attack, so this one is actually pretty damn nice. Then we have the A4, or the fifth copy total, A3 and A5 for 4 stars. Once again, overall just increasing the damage of every single card used by this character by a flat 6%, so a total of 12% if you get the A3 and the A5, but that's not just damage, it's also healing and shielding, so pretty much any multiplier values on those cards. So here we go from 250 to 300% damage, and from draw 2 to draw 3, so overall a, yes, still pretty significant increase, bringing us to then the final one, which is the A6, or the 7th copy, in that the first launcher bullet card each turn used is reduced by 1, so you're going to be able to play 1 bullet card for free each turn, which can then either negate the use for Mika or make her job easier, and overall really help with him actually getting some bullets out and getting that cycle rotation going. So we've already briefly talked about it, but by far the 2 most important characters for Luke are going on the left, the AP machine generator Mika, and then on the right, the, I do believe, brother both do have a red eye and a blue eye, so his brother Luke, who also uses bullets and has synergy depending on how many bullets have been used per turn, etc., as you see in a future vid. Peace!